Kim Brimmer, your host today for another edition of Bovinews, keeping you up to date on the cattle industry's latest in technology, management, genetics, and more. Well-raised dairy calves play a vital role in the future success of any dairy farm. Through the many transitions that calves experienced, weather changes, we have two calf care experts with us today to expand on their dairy calf programs. We'll learn about how they handle the many phases their calves go through, along with other calf management tips. Our first presenter today is Megan Schafer, the calf manager at Genetic Futures in Junction City, Wisconsin. Megan's been with Genetic Futures for 6 years since she graduated with a dairy science degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She enjoys using her knowledge of dairy cattle to continually work to improve the calf program at Genetic Futures to help the calves reach their full potentials, whether that be in the genomic world or in the show ring. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, thanks for having me. So today I'm going to go over a calf care overview of what we do here at Genetic Futures. Genetic Futures is a recipient facility located in central Wisconsin and owned by Mike and Julie Duckett. So to begin with, an introduction. So here at Genetic Futures, we have 400 to 500 calves on milk year-round. Like I said before, we're located in central Wisconsin. We raise elite genomic and show calves for our clients. Almost all of our calves born here are IVF calves. We raise bull and heifer calves at Genetic Futures. In the top picture where I have circled, the top circle is where we raise our heifer calves in our calf barns, and the lower circle is where we raise our bull calves in hutches. This is important because the bulls that we're raising go into stud companies, so they have to be separated. There are 5 people, including myself, on our calf care team. And then in the bottom right picture, you can see 3 of us with one of the top bulls that we have ever had on the farm before he went into select sires. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about calf housing. Like I mentioned, we have calf barns and calf hutches, so I'll go into a little bit of the pros and cons on each of those different types of housing. So to begin with, our calf hutches. In our calf hutches, we keep all of our bull calves so that they're separate from our heifers. So a few pros to the hutches are decreased disease spread. Since the calves aren't able to be in close contact with each other, we don't see as much disease transfer. And then with our bull calves, they leave at various times throughout their life. And so when they leave, we can just pick up the hutch and move it and be done, compared to the calf barn where we have hutches sitting empty until we move all the other calves out of the barn. And then a few cons to the bull hutches. Weather conditions, like I said, we're in central Wisconsin. It can get really hot in the summer and it gets really, really cold in the winter. So the calves can handle it usually okay, but for keeping employees, it's a lot easier on the employees in the calf barns. And then another thing that we don't love about the calf hutches is the time spent cleaning them. It takes a lot longer to pick up the hutch, clean up the pack, wash the hutch, and all of those kind of things as compared to the hutches that we use in the calf barns. In our next part is our calf barns. We have heifers in our calf barns, like I said before. And in this picture, you can see when we are filling a barn, we have a tunnel in the middle, just one tunnel for ventilation. And then in front of the calves, we have a drain, and in the back of the calves, we have a drain. And then we use calf dull hutches that can come in. You put the whole hutch in, and you can take the whole hutch out. So in each barn, we have 62 calves per barn, and we do an all-in, all-out process. So we start filling them as the calves are born, and then when the youngest calf in the barn reaches 60 days of age, we start the weaning process. And then at the same time, we take out all of the calves. And then once we have all the calves moved and weaned, we pick up all the hutches, take them to a wash bay with a skid steer, and then we can wash the hutches away from any of the calves, and we can wash the barn. Each barn also has a grain bin and water. We don't use the water for feeding. We just use it for cleaning. So as you can probably tell, I'm a big fan of our calf barns. Some pros of the barns are they're out of the elements. If it rains, the calves stay dry. If it snows, the calves are still dry. It's easier to keep them cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. If needed, we can put fans in them, or sometimes in the winter when it's really cold, we can put heaters in on the younger calves just to keep it a little bit warmer. And then another thing that we love about our calf barns is improved efficiency. It takes a lot less work from employees to take care of the number of calves compared to hutches. And then it's a much easier cleaning process as we can take everything out, wash it, and then put it all back in when it's clean and disinfected. One of the cons that might be part of the calf barns is potentially easier disease spread. I say potentially because we don't we don't really see higher incidence of disease in our calf barn compared to our calf hutches. And I contribute that to a strong vaccine program, as well as being really on top of catching sick calves between myself and the other employees, and just making sure we get those calves taken care of right away so that it's not spreading through the barn. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is how we feed the calves. So starting with milk, we feed pasteurized whole milk, which we use a repurposed bulk tank pasteurizer. And then from that pasteurizer, we have a hose that runs to a stainless steel spigot that in the picture, you can see the bottle trailer that we have. It has 7 bottles across, and then the spigot fills all 7 bottles at once. And so it's really efficient way and clean way to fill all our bottles. And here at Jenna Facer, we use mostly fresh cow milk as we sell all of our cows once they calve in, because we don't focus on the cow, we focus on the calf. So we have really high fat and protein levels in our milk, which is really good for the calves as well. We feed 2 times a day, 3 quarts 2 times a day. We do, however, feed 3 times a day in winter when we just want to get those calves up and moving one more time in the night when it's really cold. We feed bottles from birth to weaning. This is what we've just found works best for us for efficiency and cleanliness and things like that. And then we do add a balancer to our milk. This is not really for fat and protein, it's more for prevention of calcium. And then for grain and water, you can see our bottle tractor we use for feeding grain and water as well. We have a water tank that we fill with warm water when we're ready to feed, and the 2 tubs on the back we use for grain to take grain to the hutches since they have grain already in the calf barns. 2 times per day we feed fresh grain and water. The first time is after we feed milk in the morning, and then the second time is before we feed milk in the afternoon. We replace any dirty pails at this time just for health and sanitation. We feed an 18% texturized calf starter to our calves, and then we transition them to an 18% pellet at weaning, which I'll talk about next. So for our weaning process, we begin weaning when the calves are 60 days old. We do a 5-day step-down process. So for the first 5 days of weaning, they get 1 bottle of milk per day. And then we also mix the starter with the pellet, so they start getting used to eating the pellet for those 5 days. And then we do 5 days of just grain and water before they move, so that we put them on just the pellet then, not any starter mixed in, so that they get used to the feed. And so then when we move them, all that we're doing is moving and hopefully causing less stress in transition. And when we move them to group housing, and we put 8 calves per pen, and each pen has 2 super hutches per pen. And then they're on a pellet and dry grass hay from that point on until around 5 months, when they move to a different barn and they start teeing more. As I mentioned, the cleaning of bottles is the easiest way for us to do it instead of buckets. We recently purchased a nipple and a bottle washer. We can wash all the nipples at once, and it takes us 2 times on the bottle washer to get all the bottles washed. And we believe that this is the most efficient and effective way to get our bottles clean, as it works like a pipeline wash, and we have had a lot less issue with like scouring and things like that since we started using these washers. It takes us about 2 hours for washing bottles, which is pretty efficient when you're feeding over 400 calves 2 times a day. So the most important part of what we do is probably our newborn calf care because that's how the calf gets started in life. So to begin with, we have the calving pens. We have 24-hour per day monitoring. We have straw packs that get cleaned weekly. We move heifers to the straw pack when we see feet. The calf will get tagged to the recip that it came from before the recip gets moved or the calf gets moved. No vaccines are given at this time. We wait until the calves are moved to their individual hutches because bulls cannot get vaccinated or be around calves that have been vaccinated. And attached to our calving pens, we have a warming room. And this, you can see in the picture here, is two pens where we keep fresh straw for the calves and they can stay in here for a little while before moving them outside. So for the winter, we have heated floors that helps the calves dry off faster. And in the summer, we have tunnel ventilation. The calves stay here for about 20 hours or really until they get their second feeding of colostrum. In this room, I'm able to do all the tagging and genomic testing for our clients so that once they're moved out to the hutch, they already have their genomic testing completed and they are just waiting for results. I like the warming room because it allows us to monitor calf health closely for the first hours of the calf's life and see if there's anything that we need to be aware of or anything that we need to take care of before moving them to the hutch. And the calves can get up and moving before they're moved to a hutch so that, especially in the winter when it's cold, we don't have any problems with like cold calves or things like that. The most important part of what we do with our newborn calves is the colostrum. So we feed all pasteurized colostrum from the cows. We test for quality before pasteurizing, and then we feed only refrigerated colostrum. We do not freeze it, and we don't keep our refrigerated colostrum for more than 48 hours. In the picture on the screen, you can see on the left is our pasteurizer, which can hold 4 bags to pasteurize. And then on the right is the warmer. So when a calf is born, you can put the milk in the warmer, and 20 minutes later, it's ready to feed. We work with Quick or the Golden Calf Company on their products, and we have had really good success with doing colostrum this way. So for our first feeding of colostrum, we feed 1-gallon tubed. We have a single-use bag and a single-use tube so that there's no contamination of the colostrum or anything like that. And the single-use tube has really helped with healthy calves. Then we do a second feeding of colostrum at about 15 hours old or somewhere around there. And we feed that in a 2-quart bottle. We just record if it was drank. If they don't drink it, we don't tube it or anything like that. We just mark that they didn't eat it. And then we also do a first defense paste to help boost the antibodies from colostrum. So then, as I had mentioned, it can get really hot and humid. So we do a few things different here at Genetic Futures for summertime and just helping the calves do better in the heat and humidity. So first of all, feeding changes. So to begin with, we do some fly control. We add stuff to the milk balancer that we put in, and then the starter and pellet also have fly control in them. We think that this helps. We've always done it, so we can't really say one way or the other. And then on the older calves, we go back and give them extra water if needed. Once we go through the first time, we'll come back and just give more to the older calves. They're not getting thirsty at night, especially. And then the main thing that I think is important for things we do maybe a little different in summer is our electrolyte protocols. So at first sign of scouring, we give a first arrival tube, which is a charcoal and probiotic mix. And then we'll take a piece of bright colored duct tape and mark their hutch with the date that we started them on that. And then we'll feed electrolytes every day for 5 days. Everybody gets it for 5 days. And if they're still scouring at 5 days, we will feed it for even longer until the scours are cleared up. We do this every morning after we feed milk. And then when it's really hot, if needed, we'll do an additional electrolyte feeding after our second feeding. We also do some things a little bit different with housing in the summer. So in the winter, we use shavings mixed with straw for bedding. In the summer, we use just shavings for bedding. we start with the straw pack, but then only add shavings. And then if it gets really warm and the bulls are not doing well in their hutches, we will put down a sand base in the hutch to start off with for the babies, just because we usually see that the babies are the ones that have the most trouble adjusting to the heat. The older ones usually do fine. Another thing that we do is we only move calves from the warming room to their hutches in the morning or at night, just because if you move them in the heat of the day, you're just not setting them up for success. And then the calf barns, like I said before when I was talking about the calf barns, they are much easier to keep cool. So we remove the back panels like you can see in the picture, it's open in the back. We remove those at the end of spring, and then we can keep the curtains and doors open. We can put fans in the barns, things like that, just to keep the heat off the calves. And then with the hutches, there's not a lot we can do when they're in the hutch. So we check the hutch multiple times per day, like between feedings and things like that. And we'll take any calf that's showing a sign of heat stress out of their hutch into a room that has a concrete floor, put a fan on them, and just help them cool down. And usually, if we leave them there overnight, they will be much better in the morning and go on to be just fine. That is all that I have for today. But if you have any questions, you can contact me. My email is listed on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Our next presenter today is Jenna Facer, the calf manager and young heifer specialist at Rockstar Farms in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She graduated in 2015 from Virginia Tech with a degree in dairy science and now uses her talents to raise Holsteins, Jerseys, Wagyu, and a number of elite embryo calves for clients in group housing. In any free time she may have, Jenna enjoys promoting mental health in farmers, working with show heifers, and gardening with her husband Ed and her daughter Madeline. Welcome, Jenna.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I raise calves for Star Rock Farms in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We are currently milking about 1,500 cows, Holsteins, and Jerseys. So we have about 250 calves on milk at all times. Most of our calves are group housed on acidified milk. All the heifers go into the group pens within 48 hours after birth, and there's normally about 16 to 20 calves per pen depending on the number of born per week. We also raise Wagyu crosses. They are put into individual hutches for 5 to 7 days before they move to a group of just Wagyu crosses, and I'll explain why a little bit later. We chose to use acidified mob feeding for the simplicity of it. As you can see, in the picture, our setup is very simple. Each pen has a 65-gallon barrel, and there is a manifold in the front with 10 hoses leading to our 10 calf nipples. The barrels each have an agitator on top, and they are set to a timer to go off for 45 seconds every 30 minutes to help keep the milk consistent from top to bottom. The two barrels are in one insulated box. It's made out of garage doors, and this helps control any flies, mice, whatnot getting into the box, into the milk. And there's also a heater to help keep the temperature of the milk between 85 and 95 degrees. We clean those barrels about twice a week, hoses, nipples, etc. Twice a week because it's acidified. That helps to stabilize the milk. So we needed to stabilize the milk because it is sitting out all day long for those calves to drink. We collect waste milk from our sick cows, fresh pen, and if we need any more, we will top it off with saleable milk. The milk gets cooled to 38 degrees at the dairy, and I will pick it up on a trailered milk tank. We bring it back to the calf farm, acidify it, and allow it to sit overnight. This allows adequate contact time for the milk to stabilize and bacteria to be killed or stalled. In the morning, we can heat the milk back up to 90 degrees by agitating the milk while running hot water through the old Freon pipes of the tank. Once we've reached that desired temperature, we'll feed it out to each pen once a day, and we determine how much each pen gets depending on how much they drank the day before and where we believe they should be depending on their age. In the picture, that's a picture in the slide. That's a picture of them drinking. They definitely are herd animals. They like to drink together. And this picture was actually taken in the winter. So we put up heat lamps to keep the nipples a little bit warmer and encourage the calves to come up to eat. Because we do not have robotics, we have no way of knowing exactly how much each calf is eating. So having attentive calf managers and employees has been the key to making our operation work. On a daily basis, we are checking calves thoroughly at least 3 times a day. First thing in the morning, a mid-morning health round, and then before we leave for the evening. We also get hands-on checking of every single calf several times throughout their stay at the calf farm. So the day that they come to the calf farm, 1 week old, we do a pre-weaning check, a 4-month checkup, and then there is a final checkup for final vaccinations before they leave and move to the mature heifer farm. We check for signs of illness, poor eating, navel healing, any horns that we may have missed during the dehorning process. We use paste. We check for extra teats and anything at all that would make them a poor candidate for our future milking herd. Another example of the calf monitoring that we utilize is the Velcro bands, which you can see in the picture. This helps employees know which calves are still being monitored for drinking. We use clipboards as well to help keep track of the calves drinking. They need to be seen drinking at least 3 times a day for 3 days in a row, and that's indicated on our clipboards, and then we will remove the Velcro band. So I would attribute the key to our success to the people that we have and their dedication to trying anything and everything to reach our goals. We have done a lot of different trials on our own with different companies. We've changed a lot of things. We've failed a lot. We've found something that works, but not quite the way we wanted it to. And so we'll try again. What worked for other farms that do it, group housing, acidified milk, hasn't worked for us. Sometimes we will adopt something that works. For example, a farm that uses hutches. We've tried that and that worked really well. And sometimes we try things that have never been seen and that worked as well. So my point I'm trying to make is never give up thinking different ideas until you reach those goals that you are trying to reach. And the team of your employees, calf managers, and also external team members would be vets, nutritionists, calf specialists, and people in your industry. So different examples of things that we tried would be hand feeding calves for 2 days after arriving. When we first started, calves were just put right into the pen and we would help them get up to the box to drink. That worked, but we felt that there was a little too much pressure on that calf adjusting to life and the type of milk and eating by themselves and being in a group setting. So we tried putting them in hutches for a couple days. We tried putting them in hutches for several weeks. We would track how much they drank, how many health events they had. And then we didn't see a difference in health events. So we ended up trying to feed them individually in the group housing setting. And we started at about 6 days and ended up working our way down to 2 days. And that's where we made the biggest difference. By 2 days, they have pretty much figured out they can drink by themselves. They see other calves drinking, and so they go and join them. Another benefit is that with the small bottles, they are drinking enough, but they still could eat a little bit more, so they see the other calves and go up and will drink with them. Another thing that we have tried and edited and will probably continue to work around is the weaning schedule. This gets talked about in just about every calf and heifer conference that I've been to. So it's no wonder we have been trying to figure it out. What is working for us right now is reducing the amount of solids in our milk without changing the volume. So we add water because we have 10 nipples but 20 calves. So everybody needs to have a chance to get milk. So by reducing the solids, we do that. We do that for 2 weeks. And then the final week, we reduce, when it is all water, we reduce the volume and the amount of water. We also work with a custom nutritionist. So we have a custom grain that we feed during weaning. It is denser, so they don't have to eat as much grain to get a similar amount of nutrients. Because our calves can have as much milk as they want whenever they want, the grain intake is not quite as high as you might see in a hutch situation. Ventilation, another thing you will hear talked about 100 times, and we will continue to work with. We have automatic curtains, so we change that from season to season. It watches the precipitation as well as wind levels and temperature. That is something that we continue to play with. We think we have it figured out right now, but like I said, we'll continue to work with it as needed. We originally did not have tubes in our calf barns. We ended up doing that after the first winter. We also found out the second winter that because we are sitting on top of a hill, as you can see here, we get a lot of wind in this area. So our tubes were still bringing in too much wind. We were getting a draft through those tubes. So as you can see from the arrow coming in at the top, we ended up putting caps on. So that made the air going in through the tubes more consistent. Each breed is their own. So working with Wagyu has really changed my opinion on being creative and being flexible when it comes to calf managing. These calves cannot compete with Holsteins and Jerseys. We had tried putting them in with our regular calves or with our normal group housing situation. That did not work quite as well. So we had more health events for them. So what we did, we started putting them individually in hutches for 5 to 7 days and then tried to put them into our group housing. They didn't love that, still didn't love competing with the Holsteins and Jerseys. So we ended up making a barn just for our Wagyu crosses. They are individually housed for 5 to 7 days so that we can make sure they get off and going quickly and well. And then we move them into that group housing when they are ready. So whether you're raising Wagyu crosses, or not, be creative, be flexible, and eventually you will find a solution. Some of our summer accommodations that we have, being in very humid Pennsylvania, we do free range electrolytes right next to our fresh water. We do extra fly management. We will scrape out the fronts of our pens even more frequently to help keep that dry and help keep flies away. And something really important is that I've had to implement and really stress to our employees is checking sick calves first thing, or checking for sick calves first thing in the morning. That way, later on, if we find a calf that might be showing signs of pneumonia, we actually know it's more likely heat stress, and we can act on that a lot quicker and with more precision than if we were trying to check for sick calves later in the day. So, in our opinion, it's most important to find people who are willing to work together and do whatever necessary to reach those goals, whether that be the biggest calves, the healthiest calves, the highest genomic or show type calves. You need to have a group of people that are willing to do whatever necessary to reach your goals. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna, and thanks, Megan. So much interesting information covered in each of your presentations. I have a few questions for us to work through as we wrap up today's webinar. I'd be really curious for each of you, if I'd ask you what is the biggest challenge you face today as a calf raiser, what would it be? Why don't we start with you, Megan?
I would say that the biggest challenge to being a calf raiser is that there's so many moving parts working together to get to the end product. The maternity pen people have to do their job, and then we have to do our job on the calves and things like that. And so I think that's the hardest part, is that if somebody isn't doing their job or something's going wrong in one part, it just messes up everything else.
Jenna, what's the biggest?
I completely agree with everything she said. On top of that, I would say weather, the unpredictability of that. And then this is not quite as physical, but feeling relevant as part of the team, I would say is a factor in somebody working on a typical dairy. We aren't watching the milk check. We're not watching the pounds of milk coming in every single day. So sometimes people can forget that we are still an incredibly important part, and we have to track our own stuff like growth rates or the number of animals sold for dairy, voluntarily, illness stats, and stuff like that.
Well, and along those lines, Jenna, let's talk about that. How do each of you measure the success of your calf raising programs? What are some of the metrics and the targets that you have?
My farm is tracking growth rates. Our goals include putting out healthy calves that are well socialized and on track to join our herd on time. We have a pretty high type as well as high production herd, so they have to be able to compete and keep up with those numbers. And they cannot do that if they are coming out of their calf experience sick or behind schedule.
So some of the things, some of the things that we do is we monitor donor performance. Most of the calves that are here go on to be donors in our program. And so if we're seeing poor results in our donors, we kind of look back on things that may have went wrong when those were calves and things like that. And then we also just kind of try to watch our death loss and keep that under, we try to keep it under like 0.5% to 1%. And then another thing is we do growth rates about once a year on a group, just to make sure that we're kind of where we want to be.
Now, each of you talked a lot about your team and people that you work with. What do you do for training? How do you keep your group of employees up to date? How do you stay up to date on calf management issues? And better yet, how do you keep everyone on your team trained?
Personally, I stay up to date working with our vet, and then also working with the companies, like people like Zoetis, do a lot of work with them to just make sure that we're on the same page and learning all the new things about calves and things like that. And then I also have a lot of friends that are vets, so just reaching out to them and seeing what they're seeing. A lot of collaboration with just different people to try to make our program the best it is. And then my team, I have one person that treats calves when I'm not here, and 2 to 3 days a week we work together treating calves and checking calves and vaccinating calves, just so that I make sure that he's on the same page as I am about what needs to be done with the calves, so that they are taken care of when I'm not here.
Jenna?
So I would say we also stay up to date through our vet, and also groups of fellow calf raisers, people raising calves similar to the way we do, and emails from places or companies like the Dairy Calf and Heifer Association. I only have one employee working for me that will treat and manage calves when I am not there. I trained him for a couple years before um, he was able to make decisions on his own, but we selected him based on his efforts and compassion for the calves. So if that you have that care that you cannot train, the rest will come, we feel, fairly easily.
Now, each of you have those special calves that may have a higher value than others. Do you do anything different for those calves?
We don't do too much different. Our elite Wagyu calves go into individual hutches, but they are higher maintenance. But the rest typically stay in with the group. And I try not to focus on the fact that they are super special. But yeah, we try to maintain a high level of care for everybody, depending or regardless of their genetics.
Megan?
I would agree with Jenna. We don't do anything different. We try to maintain the same level of care for everything, even if we do have some elite ones. But I can say that I do know where those calves live, and I keep a close eye on them.
And as we wrap this up today, what would be what you would consider, each of you would consider as the real, let's say, the top 2 to 3 keys to a successful calf raising program? I know that each of you covered a lot of details throughout your presentation, and maybe that is one of them, attention to all the details. But what would be the most important keys to a successful calf raising program as your advice for other calf raisers?
Some of my keys to successful calf raising, like you said, one of them is attention to detail. Calves, you have to pay really close attention so that you catch them early if there's anything going wrong, and you can get that taken care of. The second thing is consistency. Calves thrive on doing things consistently the same. And then my last thing would be good employees. They care for the calves as much as I do. And without them wanting to do a good job, I wouldn't have the calf program that I do now at Genetic Futures.
Jenna?
I again agree with Megan. People who care and can pay attention to details is what I would consider the highest importance, and remembering to manage for prevention and not manage problems. Those would be my 2 main keys for success.
And lastly, are there any changes on the horizon to improve or enhance how you raise calves and heifers? Any changes you can see? I'll start with you, Jenna.
To our facilities or like in the industry?
In the industry. Or you can answer for your specific facilities. That works too.
We don't really have, I don't know that I have anything for either.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Megan?
I don't really have anything for the industry. I think just having higher standards, maybe. Like I've heard that the level of colostrum quality, they're recommending increasing that, and just like little things like that to have higher standards of care. And then on our farm, we don't really have anything that we have coming through the pipeline at the moment, but we will probably be putting up more calf barns in the future.
Excellent. Well, and as always, continual improvements. And each of you do an exceptional job with your calf programs. We're grateful that you were able to take the time with us today. My thanks to Megan and Jenna for joining us, sharing their valuable expertise and experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the Bovinews channel on YouTube, find our Bovinews podcasts on your favorite listening platform, or find more information at bovinews.com. Thanks for tuning in with us today, and we'll see you next time on another edition of Bovinews.